And Vietnam is the closest to what we're able to see as the aftermath of war. Because even after a treaty is signed, there are still patients in operating rooms in Vietnam that were dealing with napalm burns. Napalm, which is a weapon that was designed to stick to skin and keep burning. You have healthcare workers and nurses treating injuries from booby traps and landmines that tear apart limbs in ways that are difficult to reconstruct. And the real reckoning comes later. We see something known as Agent Orange, the chemical defoliant sprayed over Vietnamese jungles. And it doesn't just affect the people it falls on, it causes cancers, birth defects, and neurological conditions that show up years, sometimes decades later. The same is true for Gulf War syndrome, for burn pit exposure in Iraq and Afghanistan. These are physical things that last on years after even the last shot is fired. People go to war for all kinds of reasons: resources, territory, religion, ideology, power flexing. And there are smart people who can explain geopolitics of any given conflict in extraordinary ways. But there's something I know that rarely makes it into these explanations, which is that a bullet wound in a religious war looks the same as a bullet wound in a resource war. The body doesn't care who starts a fight or why, it just bleeds. So let's talk about what war actually does to human health, and not just the obvious injuries, which are the bullets and the burns, but the full picture, because the health consequences of war extend beyond the people who fight in them or the people who send other people to fight in them. It lasts far longer than the conflicts itself. Let's start with the soldiers, the direct casualties that are the ones who go head on first into this war. They are the ones who come back in body bags and with amputated limbs and come back with traumatic brain injuries from IED blasts. They're the ones who come back with PTSD and all kinds of mental health problems. And now let's talk about the people who didn't choose to fight. Because in modern warfare, civilian casualties aren't collateral damage. They're the majority of the casualties that happen. We have children dying in schools, we have patients getting bombed in hospital beds. The health impacts on civilians go far beyond direct injury. When you bomb a city, you don't just kill the people the bomb lands on, you destroy the hospital that they would have gone to, you destroy the water treatment plant that they would have used to purify the water that they drink. You destroy the power grid that keeps the medications refrigerated. The healthcare infrastructure collapses, and then everything that infrastructure was managing, which include things like childhood vaccines and maternal care and everything else that goes untreated. We saw this in Syria, where targeting of hospitals became a documented strategy. We see it in Yemen, where the collapse of the healthcare system contributed to what is known as one of the worst humanitarian health crises in the world, and has included problems with things like cholera that has infected over 1 million people. We saw this in Iraq, and we're seeing this today with our own eyes. Displacement is its own health crisis. Refugees and internally displaced people face overcrowding, poor sanitation, interrupted medical care, malnutrition, and other psychological trauma. Children that come from conflict zones show rates of PTSD, depression, and anxiety that rival or exceed what we see in combat veterans. And they don't have a quarter of the support systems that veterans have. And war doesn't just hurt the people who live through it, it hurts their children and sometimes their grandchildren. And that's why we are beginning to learn more about something known as intergenerational trauma, which is the idea that extreme stress can alter gene expression in ways that get passed down. We're seeing this in the children of Holocaust survivors who have been found to have altered cortisol responses, and their stress hormones work differently, even though they never experienced the trauma directly. I wanted to talk on this topic as a nurse, and I wanted to be honest about what war means for somebody who is supposed to be a healer on the other side. Because it's different from how a historian sees it, it's different from how a politician sees it, or how a general sees it, or even just how a regular civilian sees it. Working in this type of profession teaches you something about the fragility of the human body that changes how you think about violence in a very fundamental way. But let's go back to that photograph, the sailor and the dental student in Times Square. To some, it symbolizes victory or the end of a war, a joyful time, you can say. I don't know how to end a conversation about war on a hopeful note because I don't think war itself is anything easy to talk about. But from my perspective, maybe the most radical act of war in any way is not the fighting itself, it's the healing that comes after and the decision that people make to want to go in to look after the wounded, even after this dreadful event that nobody decides that they really want to be a part of.